So this being a cyberpunk style environment, it's giving me a basis of where my development phase needs to go. I've kind of broke it into a couple different things. The first thing that I've broken into is I've broken it into a workflow process. So from here to here is my transition. Now I'm not spending a lot of time working on this over here, but I still need some development so that when I go through it, I need to have this concept done. And so the first thing is that I'm working on is I need to develop a process for this. And I'm going to take the modular approach. Modular allows me to build up just different ideas. So I can have a door, a window, and I'm just going to develop this idea as so many units, so many increments. And then from there, what I'm going to do is develop the secondary floor, the upper floor, so on and so forth. So I'm developing these ideas. I'm developing this process to create a better implementation of my how do I want to explain it, of my process, of my workflow. So here is kind of an example scene. So I'm going to have like the Japanese lanterns, and this is a very cyberpunk feel to it. So the thing with cyberpunk is it's really basic as far as your initial concept goes. So I need to find reference, and I'm going to find if I type in cyberpunk and I go into images, basically you have to remember your theme. So cyberpunk is fiction, lawless subculture dominated by computer technology. So if I go to images and start looking at these images in here, the thing that I'm looking at is I'm looking at the concept behind it. So the buildings really haven't changed. I mean, there is more bright lights, there's more concept of it, but in all reality, the buildings haven't done much of anything to change from our world. So it's like Neo Tokyo or Tokyo or your big cities. So we look at things like this, and it's a dark world. Lighting is going to be dark. We've got regular buildings. We've got a lot of lights on the buildings. It's probably going to be raining out. Um, so I'm looking at like wet, or maybe it's just got done raining, and I'm looking through these concepts. These are other people's ideas, and you credit them as an idea. So I look at something like this, and I think to myself, this is an interesting concept. I like the fact that it's still old world. It's this is kind of China style, place, but it still gives me that concept. So I look at this and I say to myself, this works for my concept. I look at this and I see signs and I see lanterns and I see uh, basically flags and I see, all of these ideas. And I look at my concept here and I don't have any of this information in there that develops this process. I have some, but I don't have like enough. So this is like a still from the Matrix, I guess. So, uh, it is breaking up this concept into something more interesting. And so what I did was I broke this concept into kind of a storefront idea, and then I broke this concept into uh, much more interesting breakdown. And I've got a dumpster here. I've got kind of torn up signs and wet signs. I've got different doors and windows that I can implement here to create a different library of things. And that's what I'm looking at. That's how I'm thinking about developing my process, my concept. And so I'm looking at that idea, those concepts, to build up my process a little bit more. And so I broke down the idea here that I have a street view, so on and so forth. So I have some dumpsters. It's a back alley. It's going to be a wider street up here. So things like that are things that I need to have implemented. And those types of things are what I'm doing to develop my process, my idea. Okay, so I need another step of what I'm going to accomplish. And this is where my thought process takes in. I've got this idea, this base process here. And from there, I'm going to just create another layer and I'm going to start sketching some ideas. So the first idea in my cyberpunk theme is storefront. I want to have a couple storefronts in here, and so I want to sit down and think about my ideas of a storefront. So I'm really going to exhaust, and I'm trying to keep everything kind of square here. So I'm really going to exhaust this process. I've got this process right here. So all I'm doing with this is I'm just building out, and I'm just going to merge this layer real quick. So I'm just dealing with something like that. Okay, so I'm just dealing with this process. And now with the storefront idea, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about just different ideas. It is having a storefront is something that I look at and I say, okay, so how am I going to do this? One of the things that I can do with this storefront is actually build in an indent in the wall. So I'm just going to make a note of, all right, here, wall indented. Just that's my mental note of kind of looking at the geometry. And maybe I've got my doorway frame out here, and I'm going to have a picture window. And that's my cat who brings in several mice a day into the house. Okay, so the first thing that I look at is I look at a sense of construction and how things are done. Now, if I look at regular constructed ideas, there's a couple ideas for gates. And so this is what I want to kind of think about as a thought process. So I have my indentation. So I could put in kind of the metal panel idea and have it kind of sit over the doorway, and that metal panel rolls up into kind of a developed idea here that sits over the doorway, and it slides down into the racking of the doorway. So that's one idea that I could do. And this gives me a kind of a paneling system for the metal doorway. Another thing that I can do is I can take that indent, and I'm going to just indent again just to show myself what's going on. So I can take that indent here like so, and because it's a storefront, I can realize that, hey, I'm going to have that metal panel built right into that wall. So that is another concept that I'm looking at. And again, I'll put my doorway in there and my window frame. Like so. And so that's another concept that I can look at. Like I've got the security doors basically coming in, and they're going to basically come from the wall. So I can figure out how to build that and how to develop that process a little bit more. The next thing I can do is I can sit down and say, okay, well, maybe I want to have um, kind of this process where I've got like, let's do a little bit closer. So I've got this process here where I've got the gates. So I've got my gates here, and I've got that crisscross fencing that pulls out. So that is another process that I can look at. You know, and I can have the latch and key on this side here, and I would also have over here some type of locking system. So I look at that idea as well. So these are all ideas that I'm entertaining for my workflow process. So it sounds simple, it sounds stupid, but these are ideas that I'm implementing as a workflow process. I'm thinking about what can I do with just a security gate, um, and that is stuff that I'm looking at from a work process that I wanna develop that a little bit further. I want to, come up with this. Now, being futuristic, I need to come up with some other concepts. So one of the concepts that I can do is I can turn this element. Maybe I can develop this element a little bit further. And the security gates and stuff like that, they look interesting, they look fine, but maybe I can develop something where uh, I can lay down. So what I'll have is something along the lines of maybe some indents here, into the wall. And these indents, and then up here I have an indent like so. And so something like that, and this is my notes on the side, so something like this, it looks a little bit different, but I could add in, maybe like kind of a shell. So when it's open, I'm just going to draw on the side here. So when it's open, something like this, I've got, I can pull this feature out like so, and by doing so, like this, all right, I've got now a sense of awning. Oops, didn't want to go horizontal with that, but and maybe something like that. So when it's shelled up, this goes into a development process like this. So I'd have maybe something like this, you know, give it a little thickness. Maybe this is actually indented into the floor a little bit. So, you know, it's built up into it. So now I've got a concept of something a little bit different. Now I've got a concept of, well, hey, I've got a wall here, and it gives me the idea, it gives me that process of what am I going to do with this? And I kind of like this idea. It needs some work on it. So maybe this is on hinges, something like this, and maybe, you know, maybe it's on a square, but that gives it a little bit different idea than what I've had before. So now I could easily put a storefront, and then I could put on maybe a self-balancing sign, something along the lines of maybe the sign comes up here like so. I don't like that. Maybe the sign hangs, so we can put a sign up here like this, or maybe we can put a, you know, or a banner idea. Maybe I can put a banner up there. But now this allows people to sit from the rain when the store is open and loiter in front. But it gives you an idea of a thought process. It gives me kind of a solution to something else. So maybe, you know, maybe I can enter out, you know, a storefront like this, and that adds in a little bit more entertainment value. You know, it gives me something that, you know, it protects the whole window from vandalism, and it protects that whole process. Now, that's something I can work with and develop a little bit more. So, you know, I like that idea. I like that process. And I'm just working on one element here. I'm not developing anything more than this one element. And it sounds simple, it sounds stupid, but this is the process that now I can develop that idea and take it even further and say, okay, well, maybe maybe this is even simpler. So maybe I can got something like this here, and then I've got my door front here, and I've got my store window like so, and I've got maybe a series of latch keys here like this. And what happens is, and I'll have probably something like this. And so again, I have the same concept. It's just gonna really rough this out here. So I'm just going to add my door in real quick here. I'm going to add my window. And then I've got my spindle piece here. And I put out, let's do a little bit more of an angle. So I put out my piece that now stands out here like this, and I can put my security brackets on there, and then I can put my security brackets on here. And so this gives me an idea now that I've got like kind of a plexiglass concept going on, where I've got, you know, I've got my store, and then I could even put in, you know, my development idea. Maybe I could put signs here. Maybe it's an electronic sign or something like that. And during the day, it raises up but at night it comes down and secures the idea. So those are something that you can develop as an idea and work past that process. And I think that is the thing that most students don't do, is they don't think about that workflow process, because they want to get things, their idea down, and they want to start working on stuff. But it's these little ideas, these kind of processes that really sit down and break down the idea, and that's what this is about, is refining my idea and developing my idea, to basically make this work. And so I look at this concept, and this is an idea that I can take out further. So I'm just going to draw some simple sketches here. But so maybe this is a box frame here. Something like this. And then I've got my locking mechanisms built on here. And then I've got, kind of a electronic sheet here, or maybe it's plexiglass, or maybe it's some new type of material. And it could even be more interesting than this. I could have this as a visual, like, plexiglass bulletproof thing, but you can also build it up. So now you have a locking mechanism up here. You have your cylinders here, and then I come up with that concept right there. So maybe this now doubles as a sign. So I have like something, I can write my stuff in here like this, and then it flips up and reverses for signage. And that is a flow of an idea that now it standardizes as a LED screen, it standardizes as a graffiti barrier, and it standardizes as a something else, as like my protection for my storefront. So it's little things like this that I need to develop as a process. And these are just parts that I'm looking at. I'm developing this as a whole. Now, when it comes to, my idea, I'm just gonna merge this down here. So when it comes to an idea, I've taken my scene here and moved it to a whole completely another level. And that is really what it's about. It's about, basically moving your idea, moving your concept to another thought process. And it could even be that I go back to this idea and I put in a hinge system in here. So I've got a hinge system going on in here. So what happens is that this folds up like so, and folds in half. So now I don't need to deal with all the information out there. So putting in something simple like that, like a thought process behind that, makes it much more interesting, makes me think about that thought process and develop my idea. So I'm starting to lean towards this as a thought process. Now, every store can't afford that, so I need to go in and develop some new and some old and some different techniques. So when I go into doing my cyberpunk concept, I've come up with a process of lights and brights and but it's still that dark blue, still that attitude that you're going to do something with your development. All right. Okay, so now with this process in mind, now that I've come up with this concept of just this piece, I need to develop the idea further. And so developing the idea further takes place more interest. So I could put a keycard swipe here. I could put a physical key on the side here, something that allows me to do this. I could put a remote sensor on the door so that you have to have a remote to open and close it. And all of those bits and pieces are things that are going to help you and develop your concept to that point where you need to have that concept, you need to have those ideas down. Okay, now then it boils down into simple things like coming up with window frames and other ideas. My storefront process. What am I going to do? I want to look at like uh, not old construction, if you will. Something like, instead of cyberpunk, I would be looking at like alley. So an alley would be kind of, it's run down. It's got a little bit of light here and there, like emergency lights. Maybe it's got a garage door in there. All of these things I need to sit down and develop for my concept. Okay, and it's even like old shops, town. So I look at stuff like this, and these are other concepts that I want to think about, like how things are developed from, um, my point of idea, like what has been done, what has been modernized to these buildings. These buildings don't really get a chance to modernize. They're built next to each other, and so a lot of that concept is still freestanding thought process of what I'm doing. Um, and that's what I need to develop. Those are the ideas that I need to go even further with and sit down and break down. Yes, I've come up with my base idea. Yes, I've put in, maybe I have an apartment coming up from one. So maybe my thought process is going back to something like this, and now I have my doorway here, I have another doorway here, um, and maybe that's a double window for a double store. And that adds in much more depth and more interest, and maybe I can put in a concept of my stairs going up in something like that. So I would have my concept here, and then so this storefront would be in place of the next storefront. So I'm going to just grab this piece here, transform it, and then I'm going to grab the same thing and now I've got something of different, a different style. And I'd probably grab these windows here. I'm going to grab these windows and kind of put like so. So that now becomes my storefront idea where I can have two pieces that work together or in conjunction with each other. And that is, these are all things that I can sit down and think about and develop as an idea process. And, that is something that I need to develop as a process, as a concept. How am I going to do this? And the easiest way for me to do this is to block it out. Now, I'm going to, and the reason I'm going to block things out is because it gives me an idea of how much content I actually need. Um, so something like this would be much more easy to implement. So if I go into, like, I'm going to use Max just to do this entire thing, and the modeling and stuff. I'm not really going to get into the modeling process now, but the modeling process it's a simple process. I can take my ideas and start developing my process. And with my ideas, with this is enough to say, okay, here's what I have, here's what I need. So this concept, this idea is, I'm going to need cars, and I'm going to need some type of parking meter, and I'm going to need all of that information. So I'm going to just go here and start off with something simple. I'm going to start off with a box, and like this, and this is my first process. I'm going to add in some edges here, and I'm going to convert this to an editable poly real quick, and polygon. And so my first process here is just to extrude this out, and so I have my alleyway. And go all and flip and go properties and backface culling, say okay. So now this is just my initial concept, and it's nothing special, it's just a box. But what I can do is I can go into said box here, and there we go. I'm going to go into this box, and oops, wrong direction. I'm going to create that element here. And so it may sound stupid, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go and create a path. So I'm going to start off with this, and I'm going to zoom over here a little bit, zoom over here a little bit, and so this is my path here. I'm going to create a camera, and we're just let's see here. Let's do a free camera here, and I'm going to rotate, actually like so, and we're going to rotate something like this, and then all I'm going to do is go here actually maybe up here. And it would help to have, there we go. So I'm just going to go up and do a path constraint, and I'm going to add that in there. And now this basically zooms my constraint over, so it basically follows my path, and I can actually go follow the path. So it's like so, And now I can go camera here, and I can start off with the simple idea of this is where my process is. And so that process, it's something stupid simple. It's something really easy, but I now have an idea of where I need to kind of create stuff. And so you can see that I'm walking through the scene, and I can change my scene up, I can change my idea, and it's very simple, very easily done. And it's I didn't sit down and I didn't break down this idea into I didn't break this idea into a whole bunch of different concepts. It's just me simply creating a walk path, and now I can see how much I need to go over. And I never really look past that wall, so I'm okay with that. I'm good with that concept. And that is, those are ideas that I need to understand and I need to break down. And so doing a little bit of preemptive thought process, and using different tools, and you know breaking down the idea of what I'm going to do. Like here I would add in, I'm just going to go into AEC extended, which is not a stairs actually, and I'm just going to do a straight stair here. Actually, let's do that again. Go this way, go this way, go this way, and I'm going to break this over, and we're just going to kind of flip that around. And I'm going to move it here like so. And I go in here, and now I've got some ideas of what I'm doing. So I can do handrails, and I can do create on like carriage. So I do that. Play with my width. And I can dump that, put on my stringers. And so I have a real quick idea of my stairs and things like that. I have now some type of concept that I'm blocking out my process. I'm putting in a little bit more information in there that helps me out. And I can even go further back and do simple things like create a box. So I'm just going to create real quick sidewalks here. So now, of course, I need to make sure everything's all nice and pretty. But, so now I'm looking at it, and now I see a little bit of sidewalk, and the sidewalks are a little bit too big, but I can move the camera up. And we can move said camera up like this. And just this simple path now, walk through like this, I get a sense of idea. Now, I need to, if I look at this and say, okay, well, my problem is that I've got an idea for spacing, so I want to make sure that I have enough idea or enough room for said spacing. So I would put in this, I would put, maybe move this back over here, and let's move this over now. And now I'm getting a little bit more sense of, now I see the wall here because I have a little bit more information going on. So I know I need to create more than just this. So just by simply putting this information over here, now I know, okay, well, I'm not going to see past here, and I'm going to move over like this. And so all of this information, just plotting it down, is going to give me a little bit more information, a little bit more thought process of how much I actually need to develop. And how thick are the sidewalks going to be? Am I, I would put in, I would put a box here, and so this is kind of a dead end type of alley. So I'm going to put something like that in there. I'm going to block out a car here, like so. Maybe this is another car. So here's a car parked, and then here's a car parked. And so maybe this alley is just something that I use as, or, people would use as like a turnabout. So it's a carport, so they can back in and turn around in this area here. Uh, Maybe it's flying cars, whatever the concept is. Now I've got a sense of how things are constructed, and I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. I just need to give it a thought process of, this is what I'm developing. So I can simply say that this is my car I'm developing here. And so when I go over, okay, so now I know that this is a car, and that is something that I need to sit and develop my own ideas. So it's the industrial idea. It's the maybe this is let's convert this into an editable poly. Maybe I need to go into here, and I'm just going to extrude this one up. And maybe this is now a pickup truck. And so again, I just need enough of this to show what's going on. And so it's this simple blocking out phase that is giving me more information for my final idea, my final thought process, my development. And sitting down and breaking down each element, no matter how tedious it is, it gives me a sense of, hey, this is my concept, this is my idea. So, breaking, using the tools at your hands to give you a little bit more process is going to give you that much more push behind everything else. All right, so I hope that helps a little bit, and I'm going to work on the concept art in the next classes just to show you how refined my thought process is going to be. All right.